Welcome everybody to another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. We have another discussion on game design lined up for you for today. My guest is the CEO of Atomech and is the co-founder of GameDesignSkills.com. He is a game design consultant with a very illustrious background when it comes to the AAA, and he is now doing work in the indie and consulting space, and we are going to have probably a very meaty discussion on both. So please welcome to the cast, Alex Brazie. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great today. Thank you for asking. Really warm and sunny here in comfy Los Angeles, California, and yeah.
It is very warm and sunny here in New Jersey. It's 74 degrees right now in April, and summer is becoming endless summer, it feels like.
Yeah, it's almost like the world's warming up. But
yes.
Yeah. So anyways, a little bit about me. I've been a game designer for 23 years now. I started a little French company called Savageux when I was 13 years old, and after 3 years of doing that, they figured out I was 13 and not 23. Surprise. Anyways, but that got my taste for game development, and eventually I worked on World of Warcraft as a gameplay designer on raids, dungeons, all of that. I got to work on League of Legends, on hero and champions, and then eventually in R&D on one of the projects there. And then eventually worked on Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which is AAA quality indie game. And now No Rest for the Wicked, coming out on April 15th, or it's the 18th, one of those two, coming out very soon. And yeah, I've had the privilege of working with both massive companies and tiny companies and seen all the cultural differences from superstars to really hardworking small folks making a great product.
Mm-hmm. I am really happy you brought up No Rest for the Wicked, because I completely forgot that game was coming out. But since you're new on the cast, let me just give you a brief idea. I played 1,000 video games last year, covering them for Game Wisdom, and my memory, time is irrelevant to me these days in terms of remembering when game releases are. I have to rely on news bits and PR these days to just keep track of when they're being released. But
it is so hard to stay on top of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I cover a lot of the Next Fest showcases, any festivals on Steam, so that's another easy 50 to 70 games sometimes I can play in a week. So it is very hard, and I'm sure for you, with a background, as you just said, you've probably have seen both from the outside and within just how much things have really shifted. I mean, especially, I would say in the last 14 years, the 2010s was just a very wild period.
Yeah. It was a lot of turmoil, right? That was back when Activision was acquiring Blizzard and Tencent fully bought out Riot, right? It was one of those periods of major consolidation and turmoil. The indie scene, right? Unity was still on the rise at this point. Godot barely existed, if anything, and even Unreal was just being spoken of as something that might be available for people outside of AAA. And seeing how the industry has changed and all these tools have made things more accessible and all of these new ideas are spreading through the industry and coming to life is really kind of showcased just how much mobility has been given to people outside of these massive AAA organizations.
Mm-hmm. And with your background, both working on World of Warcraft and League of Legends, that's kind of very funny for me because I just finished my book on RPG design where I talk a lot about the MMO genre, and now I'm working on my book on real-time strategy. And of course, I had to mention MOBAs, League, Dota, and so on. And again, it's very interesting. And I guess my first question for you, Alex, because for my background, again, with a lot of people I talk to are definitely developers on the indie side. Teams that could be as small as one person, maybe the most is 15 to 20. So with your time both at Riot and Blizzard, I'm just curious, for especially for any developers or students watching this, what is it kind of working at the AAA level when you have, teams in the dozens, if not hundreds, working on a singular project?
Yeah, I mean, World of Warcraft, I think was 120, 130 people when I departed. League of Legends itself was about 100, but there's good 300, 400 other support people around Western Los Angeles, and then obviously 1,000 people worldwide. They had all these satellite companies. And I would say that the AAA experience is very much one of focus, right? I was very privileged to have the opportunity to be kind of a designer, which is sort of a mid-level role, right? We kind of are not so far from the product, it's out of your hands, but you do have to interact with other disciplines, right? And so you kind of give direction and guidance and clarity to the other disciplines around you, collaborating with programmers and artists and all of this thing. By contrast, the indie scene is very much, get your hands dirty, work with people, and you do a lot of that stuff. And that's still true in AAA. It's just that the little piece of the pie you have is much smaller, and the level of quality and the amount of work you're supposed to put into polishing it is also much higher, right? And so they're basically increasing quality by scale. That said, at the time, the design team across all of Riot, across 4 projects when I left, League of Legends, would eventually become Legends of Runeterra, Valorant, and the project I was on, it was probably only a design team of maybe 30, 40 people spread across numerous disciplines, right? So there might be 12 champion designers, but there might only be 1 or 2 narrative designers, right? And so on. And the biggest thing you realize in a big company like that is that your ability to work interdisciplinary is essential. You need to be able to speak a little bit of programmer, speak a little bit of artist, speak a little bit of producer, right? And your ability to translate those important concepts across disciplines and align people is possibly more important than any individual decision you make.
And it's certainly something that I've spoken a lot about with a lot of smaller developers, and even people who do like PR and kind of the more management side of game dev. And you need to have those kinds of skills, especially again when we're talking about teams and dozens, if not hundreds, of people. And again, you do game design consulting. I've looked at games. I've talked to so many developers as well. That is so easy for these things to kind of spiral out of control. And again, I'm sure you've heard this as well when a developer says, "Oh, I only want to work on this project for maybe a year, maybe a year and a half," and then it's 6.5 years later, 8 years later. I think I've even spoken to someone who's worked on a game for 10 years. And there's no...
That was LOR, right? 10 years of development, cooking before it came out.
Yeah. And you can have fantastic games that can take that long, but it's always that challenge. And I do want to talk a little bit more about live service in case I forget. Definitely remind me. But while we're on the subject on management and design,
of course,
there's always this, I think, this issue or this thought from developers in terms of trying to figure out, trying to force a game idea over how many days, weeks, months, years of it. And there's always been this chase of what is the correct way of designing a game, that if we just figure out the 10-step process of the perfect MMO, platformer, shooter, horror, whatever, that this will be the perfect pipeline. We can, create that solution that will work every single time. But as someone, again, who's been in the weeds and has done consulting, I just want to get your thoughts on this in terms of, is there such a thing as, the perfect game development? Because I'm of the opinion of no, but I won't hear from someone who's definitely far more professional than I.
Oh, absolutely there's a perfect game development. It's anything that I do, and obviously not what anyone else does. Of course, right? But all jokes aside, no, it's because every time you build a team, you are building the machine to build the game, right? And so many of the dynamics that come into play there is how well the people work together, how well they communicate, do they understand their responsibilities, do they understand the overall vision? And I really love that you called it in the weeds, because I think that if there is something that best describes game development, it's gardening. You need to plant the right seeds, you need to put the right things in place, but then as they grow, they're going to go in ways you don't expect them to. Something that, oh, there's a rose over there, it should have been red and should have been white. Do you change your plan, or do you kill the red rose, right? And those kind of decisions are kind of a constant cultivation of what eventually becomes a product. Recently, Jacob Wahlberg, he just shipped Go Mecha Ball, said it really well. So many great games don't have a magic recipe. They simply do a few things right and consistently apply that formula over and over and over for 7 years until you have a great product, right? And I think that that's kind of the essential thing to bring when you're coming from AAA into indie spaces, is that your process is not the solution. In AAA, process is more of the solution because you have to manage all of these cats going in different directions with different goals and alignment. And so the process becomes, how do you reconcile it? I think it was, Miyamoto who said, if I hire 10 developers, I get 7 people's worth of work because 3 people need to manage those 10 people, right? And that's okay, right? So you get 7 people out of work, but it means that the more people you have working together, the more misaligned they're going to be just by nature of being human beings. So you actually want to build the core of your game. It doesn't matter if it's an FPS, an MMO, an adventure game, a Zelda plus Dark Souls plus Stardew Valley-like, as No Rest is, right? It's that you want to take the smallest team possible to achieve the greatest alignment possible and pursue the shit out of that as many iterations as you can until you have something that's fun, but messy and poorly executed, right? And you're like, okay, there's something here. It feels kind of good, but it's ugly. The animations aren't great, but I'm like, I see the fun in it. If I hand it to someone, they're like, oh, this is fun, but why does it look like this? And then you take that little prototype and you're like, okay, this is what we want to make. What is the right way to build this? And then you go into pre-production, and that's all about building the tools to build what you just built a second time. But every money person in the world freaks out. They're like, what are you talking about? We're going to make something to throw it away. Isn't that wasteful? No, what's wasteful is doing it the right way, spending $1 million and realizing you went in the wrong direction. Don't launch a rocket, in the wrong direction. Launch a bottle rocket in a million directions, see which one looks the best, and then you start building your spaceship in that direction, right? And I've seen this over and over and over again, right? So many successful games, like let's take like Among Us, right? It's basically like a game jam that went really well, and then they kept nurturing it for a few years and eventually got found, right? Because it was enjoyable and engaging, right? It was a simple idea. There was nothing magic about the execution, right? It was moving some people around, click a button, and then, Werewolf, right? We've been playing Werewolf, we've been playing Mafia for years and years and years, and they brought it in a playful, lighthearted, and enjoyable way to a lot of people in a way that scaled. That was their magic, right? So in design leadership in particular, right, it's about creating a culture where people are okay iterating. It's always the struggle with every new team, especially people who haven't been in games iteration before. Right now I'm working with one team and they're like, we want to make a game in 6 months. I'm like, okay, great. You're okay with it being low quality? Yeah, no problem. I'm like, are you okay with realizing that you may spend 3 months of that prototyping and 3 months scrambling to build it again? They're like, what are you talking about? It's just going to be one thing. I'm like, that's not how it's going to work, right? And the problem is that when engineers invest their heart and soul into an architecture and it gets thrown away or turned over, it's crushing. Let's just say that throwing away work sucks. But that's why it's so important to do it cheaply, quickly, and effectively till you find that fun, right? And fun, by the way, for me is a very definable term, which I think is weird in my industry. So like, fun is nebulous and weird. No. It's contextual, but it's always the same things. It's, do you understand what is going on in the game? Do you care about the situation you're in and you feel motivated to pursue or flee something? Do you have a response to the situations, right? You're not just being flung around like a pinball inside a machine. And lastly, you feel satisfied that you were able to achieve or not achieve what you were chasing because of your decisions and actions. And then did this all fit in a way that was thematic and well implemented, right? And to me, like, that is the heart of creating fun, right? Which is different from what is the individual experience of fun and novelty and flow and state and all of this stuff that people go almost academic trying to achieve. And it's so wasteful. It's just not necessary. Because trying to quantify that is quantifying a specific context, right? It's trying to measure Josh as opposed to measure people. People are predictable. Josh is not, right? That's the nature of reality.
I think I need that on a shirt. I should get that on there for me.
Yeah. Right. But that's the nature of humanity. We're all wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, twisty bits of reality. I've always said that humans need to recognize that you are a certain thing, and that is your reality distortion field. You modify everything around you within the space confines, the people you influence, the objects you move, and etc. And if you don't think of yourself as a reality distortion field, you don't understand what you truly are and don't see yourself as having an impact on the world around you. right? That can
Mhm.
be something as simple as I have moved this candy bar up and down. The universe is permanently changed at my choice of arbitrary action, right? Same way that if we nurture the people around us, we encourage them, we give them just a little bit of hope, or, hey, speak honestly and earnestly about to them when things are not going well, and being like, hey, this has to get better. And it's
Mhm.
up, and realizing that you don't have control of the outcome, but pushing in those directions over and over again is what creates civilization, right? We're getting off design here, but at the 1,000-year view, humanity is better than it has ever been before, right? We have better education, we have better healthcare, we have better connection with people and interactions and things like that, and we have the potential with all these technologies. We are lonely and isolated and separated because we have lost touch with the things that are important and relevant to us in our communities around us, right? Anyways, right. But here's the thing. If we acknowledge and honestly admit the problems and work on them and fix them, things get better. That's the nature of humanity. And even if we don't fix it, our descendants will.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago about iteration, about finding those issues and being able to either improve them or figure out some workaround for someone to get past that. And again, like, I know we are not going to be able to talk for like 5 to 10 hours. So I'm resisting some of these the questions in my head. And
Of course.
what you were saying a few minutes ago about kind of like going from like that AAA mindset to the indie mindset in this regard, like, I have seen games from like people who've had backgrounds at EA, Activision, Blizzard. Like, they have backgrounds that most indie developer students would kill for, and they release a game that it does nothing. It is just it is like a dead weight in like the middle of a desert. It has no impact, and it looks very derivative. There's nothing about it that screams, why should someone care about this game? And then I can turn around and play a game. I've played games from student developers, like first year game jam related projects that are interesting. They are different, unique. And again, like, to go back to my earlier point about how like some people feel like there is this kind of perfect way to design a game, or if I do X, Y, and Z, my game will be fun and dynamic and original, and put any other marketing buzzwords you can think of. And like, to your example of Among Us, again, like, Among Us didn't like go completely outside the box. They didn't stumble. It's not like they like dug in the backyard and found a gold vein. They put together a very attractive project or a product, and it resonated with people. And again, like, I'm sure
time.
Yeah,
time to get there too.
Yeah,
they were live
like,
for a year before they got found.
Yeah, and they are definitely like the exception to that rule. And again, like, for myself, I know for you as well with doing consulting, you have probably also had a chance to see like how the industry has become very like trend focused. Again, we can go in like the last 5 years. We have Bullet Heavens. We have Balatro with like this gambling, not gambling, deck builders, Among Us, Darkest Dungeon with like brutally difficult, Dark Souls,
battle royales everywhere.
Yeah, and how many battle royales are there now? And
how many Baldur's Gate likes are going to come out in the next 5 years, right?
God, yeah.
Well, let's pivot for a little bit in that direction and talk about what I would call the four major conditions of failure for games, right? And there's sort of 4 gates you have to pass all 4, or your product is guaranteed to fail, right? And this is a little bit businessy, a little bit designy, a little bit implementation-y, right? But we'll talk about them in order, right? Number 1, there has to be a market for what you're selling. There has to be a market for it. It can't be a space that's been completely eaten up, or doesn't exist. Or if it doesn't exist, you need to then take education that this game is a type that should exist as part of your work. I mean, look at the difference between Krafton's PUBG into Fortnite. Why has Fortnite exploded? Because Krafton, actually, PUBG and Rust, right, kind of illustrated that this space was interesting. So you have to have a market for it. And this is what business people try to confirm, right? Hey, other people actually want to buy this. There's a great talk by the guy who did Crypto Necrodancer. Hey, I confirmed that there was a place for RPGs and rhythm games. There's an intersection of people who buy both of these. I've never seen a game that combined them. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, you need to make a game that is actually interesting to play, right? This is what you call the fun and enjoyable loop. And that's all the stuff I just talked about, right? Do you approach it? Do you enjoy it? Do you have a problem you can solve? You see the pathway forward, you feel good about doing it, and then it fits and you repeat, right? If you fail that one, then your game isn't engaging, and people are just going to churn out of it. The third one is that it needs to be appealing. This can be visually appealing. This can be narratively appealing, right? But it needs to resonate. And this is where narrative design and artists and all of these things come in. And you need this to stand out, right? This is what the marketing people absolutely love, is that, hey, there's something boom, boom, boom. I can just look at and taste the quality. And then the final one is that the execution needs to be good enough that when it's in your hands, it's not buggy, it's not broken, it's polished and clean, right? You have to pass all of those gates, and all of them are interdependent, right? The audience needs to exist in order for a game to be engaging and interesting, or you have to educate people on the interest of this for the gameplay to be fun, right? However, and then the technology needs to be improved all the way through the process such that you have reasonable performance and good gameplay and all this stuff. And then the art, right, needs to be cohesive and well designed. And the simple truth is that all of these take different levels of attention and resources and energy, right? And no single person can master all four, right? I have yet to meet the avatar of game development, right? Toby Fox, his art was relatively simple, right? In blacks and whites, right? It was appealing and interesting, but it was simple. Game was not technically sophisticated, but it worked, right? Gameplay was interesting, and the market, he knew that existed, right? That was pretty close, but all of those things, I'd say he hit the middle of, right? Minecraft, technically impressive, no narrative, right? It was completely on aesthetics, but built Legos inside of a Minecraft world had been proven out by another game before them, right? And so on, right? And so this is why we need to remember that we need multiple team members, multiple perspectives, and experience to guide you through that, right? The way I think of it is, there's a desert out there and you're looking for an oasis or the place to dig to find water. And so you venture out in a direction, you're like, man, I've seen strategy games, I'm gonna go out in that strategy game direction. Oh, hey, there's FPSs, I'm gonna go in the FPS direction. And you try to okay, I dig a little bit, it's not getting wetter. All right, I'm gonna go 100 feet in this direction. Oh, this is interesting, but not there. And you're just looking around until eventually some people find wells and some don't. And so what the experience of consultancy is saying, hey, I don't know where exactly water is, but you think you do, and I'm going to teach you the process to navigate to the landmark you think it is, and teach you how to evaluate if you're going in the right direction or not, right? And that's what I do. I jump in, I basically add myself into teams and allow them to continue to execute their vision, but teach them things like, hey, are you thinking about the right product analysis? Do you prototyping effectively? And so on. In fact, if you'd like, I'll teach you the 3 cheat sheet questions to ask in every conversation to figure out if people are aligned or misaligned and where they're misaligned. You interested?
Sure.
Okay. So this was taught to me by Ryan Scott, who went on to work on XCOM and a bunch of other stuff and was my manager at Riot for a good year or so. And he said, he walked into a conversation between me and Bradford Wenban, and we had been arguing somewhat loudly. We were both kind of boisterous, extroverted people. And we were just going at it for 2 hours in this conference room. And he just walked past and he's like, guys, is it okay? And we were stuck. We weren't actually angry at each other. We're just going back and forth. And he's like, okay, you're scaring everyone else outside of the room. Tell me what's going on. And we were talking about wards, right? And the importance of warding in League of Legends, right? And he was like, hey, we need more people warding. And I'm like, I agree, but we need to make sure that people respect warding and its value inside the game. And so he sat down with us and he asked us these 3 questions or these 3 topics to figure out where our misalignment was. And the first one is, what are the goals, right? What is it you are after? Because if you guys don't agree on the goals, nothing else, no actions you agree upon will ever align unless you just stumble into something that luckily hits both your desires. And well, the answer was we wanted more people warding and we wanted people to be more respectful towards supportive players, right? You got League of Legends specific wards are these little seeing eyes that are invisible, let you see more of the map. Gives you RTS style strategic insights. And we both agree on that. We both want wards to be important. We want more people participating in them. And then he's like, okay, great. Well, then what is the struggle? I'm like, well, I think they should be really cheap or at least, very cheap at the beginning, but you need to continually pay for them. Brad was like, no, I want them to be completely free. But, if we do that, then all of a sudden there's too many of them, right? And so like, okay, well, what is it that you're really important to? And well, like to me, it's more about that I have agency and choices, and people recognize that I made a decision in the warding system that mattered. Like, I'm so glad you made that choice, and they recognize what my contribution is. Brad was like, I just need people in this system and throwing wards down. I do not care as long as that happens. We need more people warding, and right now everyone thinks if I can buy a potion with 10 gold or a ward with 10 gold, I'm buying the potion because it makes me stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, oh, okay, so the issue is weights. You guys have different priorities. You are going in the same direction, but one of you is about, indexing on respect and individuality. The other one of you is indexing on accessibility and participation. Okay, is there a solution, a what, right? This is the third thing, the actual details of execution that achieves participation and decision-making and respect. And that conversation led to the triple colored ward system, where you can have a free object that gives you a ward every couple minutes, right? Brad's thing, which is everyone starts with their inventory. And then we have the red one that lets you delete wards, right? A little bit more often if you guess the right spot. And then the blue ward, which basically lets you put a little spotlight far away, but you have to use it at the right time because it's short duration, right? Mm-hmm. Now, it's not the final version that went in the game. But all of a sudden, by understanding that, hey, we had the same goals, we had different priorities, recognizing what those priorities were, we were able to get to the execution, which was where the actual, everyone talks about the execution without first sorting goals and priorities. So goals, priorities, execution, get it in that order, and you resolve so many conflicts by having people reveal what's really important to them as opposed to the details of what you're building right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think that is definitely a great lesson about being able to understand, like what you were saying earlier about fun, that everyone has their own concept of what fun is. Your job is to try to figure out, what is resonating with them, like what is special about this game. Whether, again, it is something like Among Us, about playing around and being either the trickster or the one who's trying to hunt down the trickster. Whether it is like something like with Ori, where the fun is this just thrill of moving on the ground, in the air, dashing, jumping. And to go back to your 4 points, if it's not resonating with people, if the person is just not feeling the game, it doesn't matter if you spend a month, 10 years of your life on a game. Doesn't matter if you have, super ultra 4K, your computer needs to have like 64 gigs of RAM and 72 core processor to run it. No one's going to care. And then we flip this around, look at something like Balatro, what was it, Slay the Spire, like a game that comes from like just
Baba is you.
Yeah. Just comes out of nowhere, and people are just like, oh my god, like, wait, where was this game? Why have I never heard of this before? And it just blows up. And again, it's about trying to find that kind of like special thing. As you said about finding the fun. Why should someone play this game? And again, like when we say it like this, it sounds like a very simple question, but it is not. And I have seen, I'm sure you have seen as well, plenty of people struggle with this idea of, I'm just going to put all this stuff together. Why is no one caring about it? Well, why should they care about it?
Because they didn't create the connections and meaningfulness to each individual element, right? Pal World doesn't work because they threw Pokemon into a survival game. It's because they integrated the pals into every single step of the process, and you're constantly engaged with whether it's building town and watching them hang out and running over and helping you craft something, to beating a difficult boss, to adventuring around and having these massive objectives and difficult challenges, right? It's all cohesively reinforcing itself throughout the entire experience, right? And you could only get to that by building little bits at a time and making everything connect, right? And so I have many issues with different developers or people that I've worked with over the time. But the thing about Ori is that Ori had bash, and you pushed a button and it would auto attack for you. Ori 2, we built an entire weapon system, right? And all of this stuff. And I don't know that the game got that much better for having a weapon system, but it was cool. It was a nice upgrade. It made us feel good. But at the end of the day, as you said, it was about beautiful cinematic movement that felt like a living Pixar adventure, right?
Yep.
And you feel like you are the hero of a Pixar journey the whole way through. Every single frame, right? Every single blurred animation, right? Was sold. But they found a niche for the audience. They had built gameplay that was visceral and satisfying. We cut up tons of spells and abilities from that game. I had designed designed something like 15 different weapons and like 12 different spells for that game. And 3 weapons, maybe 4, right, got in. I think it was the bow, the hammer, the sword. There might be one more. The chakram, that's right. And that's okay, right? Because the players didn't need more. They were not engaged long enough in the game. Whereas Dark Souls, right, we have all these different enemy timings and all these different, you want to replay the game and try it a different way and be agile and quick as opposed to heavy and tough, right? Needed all that weapon and variety, right, in order to keep you engaged. Which, by the way, is the same sort of thing that we did in No Rest, right? No Rest is a game of like, hey, where it's a simple, straightforward experience. You play with your friends as a community. And then you know what, we're expecting you to go roll some alts, play it again and try it a different way and mix up the flavors and right and things like that. And so, you know, in those different games, you need different systems because what is creating the legs of the game is what motivates the players. And if players want to try mix and matching and beating the same challenges different ways, you're good to go, right? That's the whole birth of the roguelike genre. If not, then you want a bespoke, beautiful, one-time, a credible experience like Ori. Maybe you play it twice for the Iron Man mode if you're speedrun it if you're one of those wild people in the Discord, you know, and that's okay, right? But you need to know those people and what is important in their hearts. Create the right content for them.
Yeah, and what you just said about like designing all these different weapons and spells, and most of them not fitting within the game. That's another very essential point about understanding game design is knowing when to cut something. Because there, again, I've seen, I'm sure you've seen as well, plenty of indie developers who will go for, I'm going to throw everything into this game.
Yes.
It's going to be a real-time visual novel, space sim, Stardew Valley, Bullet Heaven, Among Us game. And if I put all that together, you know, each individual game sold millions of copies, so surely my game will sell 10 billion copies.
You have to understand Gestalt, right? Which is the synergy and purpose between things. Something I have started telling as the first piece of advice to every single consultancy I pick up. And please, if you disagree with me, hire me. I'm happy to talk you through this one. Build your problems before you build your solutions. The exception might be your singular one core mechanic, right? If you're building Portal, you need to build Portal before you can build problems for Portal. Okay, great, fine. But after you have Portal, build a lot of problems for your, 2 portals to solve. By the way, yellow, blue. I hope you enjoyed that background. And that's, but for the most part, right, create your problems for your solutions. Create your enemies so that the sword matters. If you're going to put a hammer in the game, create an enemy that's better to fight with a hammer. If you're going to put a bow in, put an enemy that is better to beat with a bow. And then all of a sudden you have sword, hammer, and bow. Do you have different enemies that you want to prioritize each of those? If the answer is no, why do they exist? Just make Link with a sword and give him a bow if those are the only 2 things that are relevant, right?
Yep.
And that leads to elegant content that is engaging. One of the struggles actually in World of Warcraft was that at the end of the day, you have all these abilities and all this stuff, but that's because the game at the end of the day was boil the HP bar down faster, don't stand in the fire, right? Heal other people if you can, right? And so, like, for example, one of the things I did was the Warlock rework. And so I said, I want to fundamentally attack this core problem of all I do is make bars go up and down. And then I realized I might not be able to solve that core problem, but I can let them choose what they're optimizing for in each moment. Do I press a heal button? Do I press a big nuke? Do I press an AoE? And they are the one making that decision on the fly in the moment. And that makes the reinforcement of I'm doing the right thing.
And again, it makes them resonate with the game. Makes them care that their character is attacking or healing or buffing or something. And like to the example we said a few minutes ago about Power World, like when Power World came out, I saw so many people just immediately dunking on this game. It's stupid. Developers were lazy. It's just they threw stuff against the wall, and who gives a crap about it? And
AK-47 shooting Pikachu, why? Right?
Yeah. And again, like, it's when I wrote a piece about it, I said, like, it's a potluck of mechanics, but it's a good potluck of mechanics. Everything fits. It's there
Yeah.
because it matters. There's a reason for it to be in the game. And again, like, we talk about this stuff, and I'm sure, like, as we're having this conversation, like, this stuff sounds like very rudimentary to us. Like, it sounds like we're just basically speaking algebra. But if you don't
Yeah.
understand design, or if you're trying to come at this from outside, we might as well be speaking Latin if with some of these
Yeah.
concepts.
And that's the struggle, right? Is that your game concept works in your head because you imagine all the connections in your head. The discipline of design is not necessarily about coming up with a cool, innovative, new way of X thing working. It's about describing how everything works in a way that is intuitive, enjoyable, engaging, and reinforcing, and making it work together, right? And that's why the discipline of design is so important.
Yeah.
I like to say that an architect can build a building, an interior designer can make a building beautiful, but without both of them working together in concert, you have some really ugly architecture that's very functional and not super exciting, right? Or very beautiful but falls over, right?
Yeah.
And understanding the beautiful dance of the different disciplines and respecting all of them and how they bring their value to the table is what makes game development so exciting, engaging, and interesting. Why I love being in this space.
That's why I
Nice
love
work.
talking about this stuff morning, noon, and night. And yeah,
Um,
like, and something else I think is I want to kind of give you a chance to like expand on that we've been discussing again is this idea of making things very approachable, making them appear very simple. Because I see
yes.
this as another trap a lot of developers, even fans, tend to fall into. This idea again that complexity means a game is great. That if it's confusing to follow, or you have 47 pages of stats and symbols and formulas, that the game must, if it's complicated, then it must be deep. Ergo, it must be good. And we've seen this pushback. And again, as we're talking about, I'll post a video about my thoughts on strategy and roguelike design, how I feel like they're kind of stuck in a rut because of this. That
Yeah.
people feel like if it's made easy, that if it's simple to understand, that if someone can look at this and within 5 seconds say, okay, I have to do this, this, and this, then the game is dumbed down. Or, it's being made for the casuals, or it's stupid. And again, like, as someone who studied this, and get for yourself as well, like, this is the kind of stuff that just drives me bonkers when I hear people like complain, oh, you made it easy to figure out when to swing a sword, or the player doesn't need to spend 5 hours to understand that they should build I don't know, the market first before the barracks.
Yeah. The thing I like to say is every single one of us can do just about any single motion from a dance, right? Think about all the single ladies, right? Like little motion. We can all do that. We can all do any individual step. How many of us can do the entire routine together, right? Very few of us, right? And maybe more than it was a pretty popular song, but my point being, games are a dance. And so simplifying some pieces doesn't mean that the entire dance becomes trivial, right? And understanding clearly what the steps of the dance are doesn't make it any, doesn't really change the performance of that. But again, I like to, I'm actually writing a course on game mechanics right now. I love that you've hit on this topic of elegance, complexity, right? Because at the end of the day, what makes a game deep is the amount of effective and relevant complexity that actually matters to the gameplay, not the total complexity. Now, that does mean, if I have rock, paper, scissors, we cut one of them out. Did the game get more interesting or not interesting? Well, it depends on how the rules work now. We only have two choices in rock, paper, scissors. It's about, hey, that each individual choice matters, that it fits into this whole overarching scheme, and that the payoff for whatever investment you've put into it matters, right? I look at things like Hades, tons of skills and abilities in there. You don't have total control over it, but mixing it together is kind of the fun for this run. Oh, this run's a dud. Whatever, I'm just going to practice dodging the Minotaur's attacks and get better for when I eventually do get the run that's going to get me all the way to Hades again, right? But yeah, let's just talk about this concept really quick. Celia Wagar did a really great blog post on this, and it talks about how there is a concept of total complexity, every possible thing that could happen in a game. And there is, effective complexity, the ones that actually matter. And then there is competitive, in complexity, which is like the things that are actually competitive against each other. That's a tiny little circle, right? Mm-hmm. And what you're trying to do as a game designer is pull that inner circle as big as possible, right? Relative to the complexity of the entire system, such that you have a fun and interesting place to play where lots of different styles exist. And reclaiming that complexity into value that is relevant is effectively the definition of elegance. The total options divided by the relevant options, right? The higher your, or is the way around, relevant options divided by complexity. Yeah, something that's fine. You get it. It's like that relationship, right? You want that to be as powerful as possible.
Yeah.
And so throwing things in that don't matter doesn't increase the value of your game. It doesn't make the game happier. It doesn't make anyone else more enjoyable in the experience. So.
Yeah, and to that point, I've been thinking a lot about kind of modern roguelike design with the likes of Latros, Slice and Dice, and a lot of the deck builders. And one of the things I think we've seen and change in roguelikes in the last 5 to 7 years has been more this approach to fewer but more interesting or more polarizing choices. That, as you said, it's not about giving the player 10,000 different items and artifacts and swords and shields, but maybe 10 swords that are completely different from one another, that it's almost like a completely different game swapping between them. And like we said, it's about making this resonate with someone so they know, okay, in Balatro, if I choose the Joker that gives me plus multi on if I have a pair, well, now I won't go for pairs. But then let's say I get the Joker that lets me get multiplier on all face cards. Well, now if I go for this, I can get all this, and we can start again tracking this path of how can I make this work? How can I break this game? And maybe it works. Maybe you get to e to the power of 15. Maybe it doesn't work. You get 600 chips. Game over, hit restart. The board is clean and wiped down or wiped clean, you go again. But you can learn, you can start putting these things together. And it's made very elegant that the player understands, okay, if this Joker does this, my deck handles that, I get all this. And we can, from the opposite of this, I've seen games where it's okay, I need to, if I have freezing and ice, and it's multiplied by spell damage to cold, and then there's a percentage of ice to physical, somehow I will do 200 DPS. And at some point, these numbers just end up breaking down. Why do I care if I go from 6 million to 6.2 million? But again, if you go from 1 to 3, that's a huge deal. Yeah.
I love that you went into the numbers and balance space, right? Because I think that one of the biggest signs of a naive or first-time designer is they obsess over balance as opposed to options and decision-making, right? Because kind of the naive creative director is all about expression before purpose, and the naive game designer, right, is like balance before agency, right? It's about, do you have power over the situations in front of you, right? And I think a lot of what we've been talking about, people allured into the illusion of complexity, is that because they enjoy finding a pathway through the noise, right? And that part is interesting, right? The pattern of enemies on screen, the movement of monsters in an FPS, and so on. And so that pathing through the noise and finding patterns that work is the optimization. It's the learning. It's the intriguing puzzle we want to overcome. It's why so many designers tend to like roguelikes, because you don't have control over all the variables. But you usually have enough control, you can win anyways, right? The deck is stacked against you, but I see a pathway to victory, right? And so, right, creating as many different pathways to victory that could feasibly work, right? That's usually the journey of the designer, right? And opening and unlocking those pathways and making them viable enough, right? The biggest disappointment, I would say, of World of Warcraft became when that DPS meters existed, but that 2 and 3 percentage point differences in DPS meters alleviated the need for adaptive, deductive, and on the fly reasoning in the game. And that happened because of, frankly, very bad systems design in terms of mana mechanics, energy, rage, things like this, that encourage people to constantly be sending inputs over the network as opposed to making smart choices at the right time. Dragon's Dogma is a very messed up game with a lot of low quality elements, in my opinion. But one of the things I loved about it, particularly as a magic archer, was that I press and hold the button to charge up my magic bow, right? And it begins locking onto things. But that is not the decision point. Of course, I need to press and hold so that ideally the whole spinner fills up. It's that there is a reason for me to let go of the button early when the dragon's wing is down and the weak spot is exposed. So all the missiles fly over and slam into it before the wing comes up and now blocks it, and it does 30% more damage, right? And because that is dynamically adapting moment to moment due to the animations, I am fully engaged, even though the Warcraft style perfect rotation is hold till full release, hold till full release. The game says no. You want to be watching the gameplay, fully engaged with it, and trying to min-max that optimum path with what the game says is actually optimum. And that's great, and that keeps you engaged and moving and, on the fly, adjusting your behavior continuously.
Yep, and I was gonna say, and that's like my style. Like those are the games I like. I don't like to do a lot of like pre-planning. I don't like to be told, "Oh, just bring these 5 potions, take these 3 weapons. Yes. It works every time." I want that messiness. I want to be like, "Oh, I picked up the staff this time. How do I make this staff work? Oh, I have this. How do I make this work?" And so on and so forth. And
that's exactly right. And getting to change the pathway through, playing a different classes and complete a different feel, even if the content is all the same, right? Yep. I have to plug a little game here real quick. It was Caves of QUD. It's QUD. A great example of a game that is at the base bones. It's roll some dice and some damage happens. But they give all of these different random play styles and pre-made templates to start with, such that you can have completely different experiences in the first 20 hours of that game. That even though, I played the perfect Truekin, the traditional RPG path, and just powered up and beat it, you go and play as a mutant, and it's a completely different experience, even though the game mechanics are identical, right?
Yep.
And those sorts of texture and variety add so much to games and game engines.
Yeah. And I just want to add one last point. As you were describing roguelike design in terms of the multiple viable paths, I have said that time and time again. For the people watching, they know what word I'm about to say, and I always use the term variance to describe how many different ways you can actually play a roguelike. Because, again, like as we've been saying, you can give me 10,000 different items. If the boss is immune to 9,995 of them, all those don't matter. So why are they in the game?
And variance is not randomness. People hook on randomness thinking it's variance. It's not. Variance is the window of viability, right? Yep. It's that up and down that is controlled and planned out, right? It's a dice roll, or it's a damage number plus a D4, not a 5 damage plus a D100, right? Because the level of chaos comes out of control.
Yep.
And so, I love that. I love that quote. It's a good point.
Yeah. And I know we are approaching time, and if we're not careful, this will be like 10 hours long, and there's so many things we can talk about for sure, Alex. But
I'm sure
I definitely want to have you back on, because I do want to talk more about kind of managing like the live service of the game and kind of the challenge.
Love to talk about that. Yeah.
But I know you have to go in the next few minutes, and I guess any final points, any final gems of wisdom you would like to tell the audience before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I have one thought and then one little thing I'd like to offer to people who are interested. The final thought is just remember that there is a pathway forward, and that pathway forward may be backwards, right? If you aren't considering 3 or 4 different options to move forward, then you haven't really thought about possibilities. You're just chasing what is instinctively comfortable to you, right? So shift your thinking. Try random ideas. Break yourself out of the ruts that your thinking is in. Do that by exposure to other people, other ideas, other games. That is the most powerful way to move yourself forward, right? Get that first principle style thinking that unlocks the fundamentals that gives you the ability to utilize your full creativity. Obviously, for those who are interested in coming and hanging out, talking about game design, I do run the funsmith.club. That's the website, funsmith.club Discord. Open to the public. Anyone can join in. We have plenty of discussions there. And I am about to announce in the next few weeks a game mechanics course. It's 12 weeks long that actually teaches people to go from singular game mechanic to actual gameplay loops. And I'm really excited about it. And if anyone's interested, you can go to the site and sign up. And I'd love to have any of your followers come in, and we'll give them a nice little discount for having come through you. So,
all right. Well, Alex, again, we can certainly go on to any number of topics for tonight. And if you are free in the future, I'll be more than happy to chat with you more, because this has been a really great one.
Thank you, Josh. I love the topics, and you can tell you've definitely been thinking about design and immersing in it for a lot. Let's do this again. I'd love to chat, and perhaps we can find something that we have opposite perspectives on and see how we can find resolution between them. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah, sounds good. So, anything else you would like to mention in terms of social media, sites, links that you haven't brought up yet? I have the links you sent over. I'll include those in the show notes down below for people listening.
Sure. If anyone wants free resources on game design, www.gamedesignskills.com. I and my partner David run this website and have for about 2 years. We give away literally a new article written by a professional in the games industry every single week. And obviously, we also have courses and things like that for those who are going deeper. And you can find me at Twitter, LinkedIn, pretty much every form of social media, and Discord at Zelnath, at XELNATH. Feel free to say hello, say that Game Wisdom sent you, and happy to say hello and meet some new friends.
All right. Well, Alex, again, this has been a really great conversation. It's always fantastic when we have these design discussions, because like I said at the start, this is like the bread and butter how my mind works these days. So this has been fantastic, and definitely don't be a stranger. I hope we can get our schedules aligned again in the future, and we have a lot more conversations.
Sounds great. I hope the audience enjoys it, and we get to do this again.
All right. So, with that said, everyone, we're going to wrap things up for the discussion here. You'll find links to everything that Alex mentioned in the comments down below. Do the YouTubing stuff if you are enjoying this here. Check out my Discord and my Patreon. Support go towards getting more daily streaming. And as I always say, if you are a developer working on a game or just want to chat design, I am always happy to have guests on for this series. So, Alex, for you, I hope you have a great rest of your night, and I'm sure we will chat again in the future.
Thank you, Josh. Had a great time.
And for everyone watching, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and the science of games. And until our next show, have a great night.